It's a Dan Schneider day. Finally, we're bringing him back. Welcome, everybody. This is Fantasy Football Today, presented by BetMGM, the sportsbook born in Vegas, and we are talking about the lessons we have learned. 2 lessons from each of us from the 2024 season. And Dan, I'm going to ask you, I disagree with one of your lessons. Which one do you think it is?
I think it's the second lesson.
About the rookie wide receivers?
Yes.
That is correct.
It was a controversial one, and I plan to make my case when the time presents itself.
I think we just had the best rookie wide receiver
and I knew you'd say that
class in at least 10 years. And honestly, it was arguably better than even the 2014 rookie class. We had 3 guys finish in the top 13 in PPR. We only had 2 in the 2014 rookie class. Beckham and
how many in the top 24 from that class, though?
I will tell you in a
moment.
Was
Brandon Cooks in top 24 receiver?
No, he wasn't. I don't think he
Landry was.
Evans, Landry, Beckham.
It was Evan. It was all right. I'll double check on Landry and Cooks, but
Sammy was good his first year, wasn't he? Too.
Beckham at wide receiver 7, Evans 13, Kelvin Benjamin 15, Jordan Matthews 24, Sammy Watkins 26.
He wasn't as good, Sammy.
Sammy
was the Marv Harrison of that class from a fantasy standpoint.
Yeah, a little bit, but I think he
had 4 top 24, right?
Top 20. Well, if you want to expand it to top 26, it's 5. But yeah, top 24, it's 4.
So four starting wide receivers in a 2 receiver league.
Yeah.
And this class was 3.
Yes. Because
no,
because Harrison was 25th this year.
Well, that's not top 24, is it?
Not top 24.
No, actually, I'm sorry. He was 25th in non-PPR. He was 30th in full PPR. So yeah, this class had 3 in the top 13. The other class had 3 in the top 15 and 5 in the top 24. The other class was better, but in terms of, I would say 3 elites in this one and 2 in.
You can't Azer stat this to make it fit your narrative.
Oh, Azer stat.
You had 2.
This is like when the Azer stat gets butchered, though. He's like chopping it too much. He's cutting it too thin.
Actually, I forget it. You're probably right because
too diluted.
Here's
the Azer statted this one to death.
Here's the thing: Evans was wide receiver 13 in that class, and McConkey was wide receiver 13 in this class. And Evans actually, that's overall, not per game. Evans actually averaged 1.4 more PPR fantasy points per game than McConkey. So he was better than McConkey. This wasn't a great year for wide receivers, I think, at least at the top. All right. Anyway, that's going to be one of the lessons, going to be about rookie wide receivers. And we'll get into the others. Well, how about right now? All right, Dan, go for it. Give me your first 2024 lesson learned.
Before we do that, since we have a little bit of time today on a kind of wonky show, it's a small thing. I was thinking about it. It's a small, quick thing. I was thinking about you the other day. I was having a unprompted discussion with a friend about action heroes, and Tom Cruise came up. And I found the most damning evidence. I actually forgot to present this to Thomas beforehand. That's a mistake on my part. He might have been able to play it over. There might have been copyright issues anyway, so it might not have been a moot point. But there is the most damning evidence of all time online that this is your worst take. There was a video of Tom Cruise doing, you know how he does his own stunts?
Yeah.
Doing one of his own stunts. And in the video, he injures his ankle and it basically like bends backwards. It's a horrible looking injury. He finishes the scene. He finishes the scene on a gimpy ankle in one of the most damning pieces of evidence that you could ever present to anyone who says Tom Cruise is not an action hero.
Would you believe I was actually talking about that exact scene yesterday with a bunch of buddies?
That's amazing.
I swear to God. And I saw a great clip of actually Matt Damon on an old Conan O'Brien show talking about a conversation he had with Tom Cruise, where he did a stunt, his own stunt, where he was running down the side of a building.
Yeah, that's the one
with a harness, whatever. And he said he went to the safety guy and said, "Here's the scene I want to do. I've been wanting to do this for 15 years." And the safety guy goes, "You can't do that. You're crazy." And Matt Damon goes, so the next thing Tom Cruise says was, "I got a new safety guy."
Yeah. Yep. And that's according to Adam, he's not an action hero star.
Okay, I didn't say he wasn't a stunt man. I'm just saying, it's his movies.
Don't walk this take back. It's terrible. Let's get into some lessons learned.
Okay,
so
go ahead.
We'll start at the top with my first lesson learned. And my first lesson learned as we move forward to 2025 is the NFL has changed and my running back strategy needs to change with it. So what do I mean there? You look at the last season and the last couple seasons, and the game has certainly changed from an aesthetic standpoint for fans, but also just when you look at the numbers and when you look at the actual tape. And when you turn this thing into an X's and O's game, defenses are playing a lot differently. There are few and far in between Wink Martindales, who's not even currently in the NFL right now, but Wink Martindale style coordinators. You could throw Steve Spagnuolo in there, if you will, that are playing man coverage, press man, a lot of guys around the line of scrimmage, one safety high. And this is becoming a thing of the past because defensive coordinators have come from similar trees. And within that tree, it's a Vic Fangio tree is very popular in the NFL. And what that usually means is we're playing 2 high safeties, or we're playing cover 3 or cover 6, and we're keeping everything underneath, eyes on the quarterback, eyes on the underneath, rally, play team defense. So what does that mean? It means the NFL has changed with it. For a while, we saw quarterbacks trying to figure out what to do with that. We saw a lot of passing, and that has kind of come down over time. Last season, I thought was a big, crescendo of all that, where teams started to lean more on the running back, sometimes a solo running back in a lot of these situations. Earlier in the season, Joe Mixon, when that offense was a little bit better. So I think as that continues, and there's no sign that will change, and we will get more of those man-heavy, single high safety look defenses, we're going to see teams more cognizant of running the football, establishing their run, and establishing their team based on their blocking scheme and their run game. Potentially more of the receiving passing game. We haven't really seen that from the running backs, but I think for me, what it tells me is if the NFL and the teams are starting to emphasize running back and the run game as a bigger part of their offense, I need to emphasize running back as a bigger part of my fantasy strategy. And so this coming season, it's going to look different for me when I go to the drafts. I've been very anti-drafting running back for a while. I made it clear on this show. But as things change, you have to change with them. So that's lesson number 1 for me.
But do you think that, and I don't disagree with you, but do you think that based on how teams are going to adjust to that, and this is not a, I think, superstar running back class coming into the league, but it's a pretty good one.
Oh, yeah.
Especially with a few of the guys at the top, that we're going to see, maybe I'll try and, not go overboard with maybe 3 starting running backs out of this class, maybe 2.
I think that's fair.
That end up on teams that they could be the starter, or let's say like a Bucky Irving situation by, week 4, 5, 6, whatever the case may be, that they end up emerge as starter. Same thing, Tyrone Tracy, that we're going to get a little bit more depth at the position. And to your point, what we did see, I think, a little bit more this year was more of a featured back and less of tandems. We did see a lot more teams, going toward not 1980s, 1990s of everybody's got a guy that's getting 250 plus carries, but we've seen, a little bit of a shift to, more of a focal point toward one guy, that it opens up the position a little bit more, and that we get an opportunity to still draft the same way if that's your philosophy. Because as we saw this year, and as we see every year, I know, Adam, you probably make the case that last year was better than this year in terms of hero RB or just waiting on guys and getting guys off the waiver wire. There are always going to be guys who emerge, and you can still lock up your stud receivers. And like for me, I'm not going to probably deviate from hero RB. To me, that it's strategy that works the best for how I like to draft. So get that one anchor running back and then throw some darts. I did it in our dynasty draft yesterday. I've been doing it in our early mock so far. So I almost like the fact that teams are doing this way, because you can still get your stud receivers and then build out your running back depth in maybe a little bit more robust way than we've seen in the past.
Well, some stats to back up the trends that Dan's talking about. You look at pass attempts per game and the where it ranks. Pro Football Reference ranks like every season basically since the 1930s. So the most pass attempts per game were happening about 8 years ago. 2016, 2015, 35.7 pass attempts per game per team. 2013, 2020, they're next on the list. 2019, 2014. 2024 is 24th on the list of most pass attempts per game. 2023 was 15th. We had 1 fewer pass attempt per game per team in 2014 than 2015. So that's the difference between 15th and 24th in the ranking. It's a lot of numbers I just threw at you, but we're throwing less. In terms of passing yards per game, 2024 ranked 17th, 217.6 passing yards per game. In 2015, that was the peak of this. 2015 and 16, it was over 240 passing yards per game. It's 244 passing yards per game. We're down to 218 per game this past year. The year before, 219 per game. So, yeah, passing is down, which also could make you say, should I put more emphasis on elite quarterbacks? You could think of it that way as well. I'd also like to point out that ADOT just doesn't matter anymore. Here are the bottom 3 teams in ADOT this year. Dolphins, Lions, Chiefs. Here are the top 3 teams. Colts, Packers, Ravens. You get the Bengals are 23rd. The Bucks, 25th in ADOT. So that doesn't seem to matter at all. But yeah, no, it's a good point, Dan. All right, I like that first lesson. Don't love the second lesson. Do not love the second lesson. Go for it. Actually, before we do that, if you haven't signed up for BetMGM, let me tell you about BetMGM real quick here. You've been hearing about it, but there's still time to sign up and use our bonus code FANTASY, and you're going to get up to a $1,500 first bet offer on your first wager with BetMGM. Download the BetMGM app and sign up and use the bonus code FANTASY. Deposit at least $10. That's it, just $10. Place your first wager on any game, and you'll receive up to $1,500 in bonus bets if your bet loses. Just make sure that you use the bonus code FANTASY when you sign up. All right, lesson number 2. You're on mute, sir. You're on mute.
Sorry, there's some work being done on my house. So I want to make sure I mute when not talking. But before we get to lesson number 2, I want to address something Jamey said, actually, that was interesting. So I think, to be clear, when I say that that's one of the lessons I learned and I'm trying to carry it forward, it doesn't just mean for like locating my early backs, my workhorses in rounds 1 and 2 and 3, because I think Jamey makes a great point about that. We may have some more uncertainty there. We may have some more timeshares. What I'm looking at really when I say that is down the line. I'm talking about like decisions I would never make in the past. Like, will my flex be a running back? That used to be a decision that I would always say receiver, especially in any version of PPR. Non-PPR would be maybe a debate. Now I'm looking at it like, let me just get the best player in those spots. And that oftentimes, and we know this because we were setting our lineups every week. We were going through this past season. It was a running back in a lot of those situations. And we were throwing that in. We're slotting them in. Maybe you threw in the receiver, but a lot of times that receiver didn't do anything, because the fact of the matter is, teams are not going to, I don't think at least, adjust what they're doing defensively. I think the changes could come on offense, not defensively, because have you guys ever played the game Stratomatic or heard of it? Either of you?
The baseball thing?
Football.
Oh, no.
Football. I would love to play with either of you. It would be so much fun. To me, it's the greatest game ever created. It's a board game that really mimics football. And in that game, you can set your defense a certain way. You move 11 pieces around the board to set your defense a certain way to invite the run. And oftentimes when you do that and the opponent knows you're going to do that, he calls run, he calls it perfectly, he still only gets 2 or 3 or 4 yards. And that's essentially what these NFL defenses are doing. They're daring them to run, and they're relying on their D-line to make the plays. And oftentimes they do. So I don't see that really changing. And within that, the talented players that Jamey was referencing, there's going to be about 20 running backs in this class that people think are NFL grade, ready to be impact players in the NFL. They may not be the Bijan Robinsons, but they may be the Bucky Irvings and the Tyron Tracy's. Those guys make plays, and you give them the ball to make plays. So I think NFL teams are going to continue doing that. So I think what we really could see is more flexes becoming running backs and more depth that you want, like those middle round picks, to be running back picks over the wide receivers. That's where I might be making the biggest change in my strategy. So
I think what's somewhat fascinating about this is that, and I'll get to it with one of my lessons, but the players that we may end up reaching for at that position that could be problematic, and that's the older running backs.
All right. Well, we'll take a break here before we get to Dan's second lesson, and then we'll tear it to shreds. We'll be right back on Fantasy Football Today. All right, here we go. Rookie wide receivers. What do you have to say about them?
I'm happy that I got to say this right after the commercial was the Masters. That music is so soothing. It just gets me right in the mood to give this lesson that's about to get torn to shreds by Adam. At least let me finish it. The lesson will be, and make my case. Or should I give you the lesson and then make the case, or should you just rip it apart, just hearing the actual lesson?
I'm ready to rip it apart. Yeah, go ahead.
I rip it apart. The second lesson for me is, it's not possible to be too aggressive drafting rookie wide receivers this coming season.
Yeah, I mean, I just disagree with that. I think you look at, just go back to 2023, and we had 4 wide receivers drafted consecutively in the first round, and only one of them was fantasy relevant, and it was Jordan Addison, who finished as wide receiver 18 in non-PPR, number 23 in in full PPR, and he had 10 or 11 touchdowns, I think, that year. But the best wide receivers were Puka Nacua, who was amazing, and then Addison. And then you had Jaden Reed. You had Rashee Rice, who was only good for like the last 5 or 6 games. You had Zay Flowers, who was
Wait a second, Adam. Was Puka Nacua a rookie wide receiver
2 years ago?
Isn't that what we're talking about?
Yeah, he was amazing.
Okay,
he was the only one.
I thought you weren't qualifying him. All right, that's fine.
Yeah, Tank Dell was great too. No, Tank Dell was great. Tank Dell was great too. But those first round receivers were a disappointment overall. Even Flowers, finishing as wide receiver 30 per game, he wasn't really that good for fantasy. I don't know. Look, we had 3 great rookie wide receivers this year. Before that, we had 6 wide receivers in the previous 9 years combined. 6 rookies finish as top 13 wide receivers. So it's just this. I just don't want to overreact to this season. I do think you can be too over aggressive with rookie wide receivers, and I disagree with your stupid lesson.
All right, I'll make my case now as the drilling begins in the background of the bathroom that's being worked on. So
they're fixing the toilet, the famous toilet.
Famous toilet is finally getting redone. It's gonna be nice, but it's gonna be. Maybe I'll move the setup back in.
There you go.
But listen, Adam. Even in the case you made about a class that was viewed, and I think it's fine to make the qualification that yes, this 24 class that we just saw was not historically, but it was up there for one of the better wide receiver classes. But the 23 class was up there for one of the worst at the top, and that's the class you're using. But even within that class and that case that you made, I remember back to August 2 years ago. I don't know if you do because it seems like you know, but we weren't taking Zay Flowers anywhere near. We were taking him like wide receiver 40 in those drafts. He didn't make a lot of noise in training camp. He was injured. So there was even value to be had on him just getting to wide receiver 30. JSN was a bust from where we were drafting him. That's probably the biggest case you can make. But even if you look at this past year, Marvin Harrison was the bust based on ADP. We pumped him up and he didn't deliver. But you had hits across the board. Even Ladd McConkey coming on late, right? Brian Thomas Jr., Malik Neighbors. You're looking at players who just blew out their ADP.
That's just 3 guys, though. That's not across the board. That's just
no,
3
Adam.
guys.
But like, it's not.
They were great.
Okay, it's a fantasy. The strategy here isn't I'm gonna take 6 shots and all 6 are gonna work. The strategy is if I take 6 shots, the 3 that work are going to be league winning values.
No one drafted all 3 of those guys, and I would go back to 2022.
Any of them, I'm saying.
I go back to 2022. Chris Olave was the best rookie wide receiver in 2022. He was wide receiver 27 per game. Garrett Wilson, wide receiver 31 per game. Drake London, wide receiver
being drafted high.
It doesn't matter. Neither was Brian Thomas. You take your shot. These guys didn't work. If
you're wide receiver 30, for example, you're borderline starter on a weekly basis, or you're a starter in most leagues. Most leagues play 3 receiver.
Yeah,
and then past that ADP, so it's a win still.
Okay, ADP. But it's not a
small win. It's a very small victory.
It's not a huge win here. It's not
a loss. It's not a loss. The point of why I'm saying this, and I think this is the case every year, but obviously you should be more aggressive in the stronger rookie classes at wide receiver. But no matter what, the ADP is always going to be lower than it should be because people haven't seen them play football. They're not common names, and because their roles are uncertain. But as we're moving forward and we're seeing things change in the NFL, we're also seeing the targets not go the way that we're expecting. We're seeing different target shares than we're expecting every single season. We're seeing players emerge based on injuries. That you could say that's happening, throughout time, but it's still the case. And so no matter what, you're going to, in my mind at least, you're going to be making a good bet. It doesn't mean it's going to work every time. It just means that if these bets work 4 of every 6 or something like that, you're going to be printing value over time. And I really do believe with most of these players, like Ladd McConkey is the best example of this last year. He's going undrafted in a lot of leagues or end of the draft. He had no role. He was injured in camp. People are like, oh, they're going to play a lot of 12 personnel. They're going to play 21 personnel. He's not even going to be on the field. And yet the people who bet on talent there as the rookie receiver who liked his tape were huge winners down the line. And he was kind of like a league winning pick for you in the playoffs.
I think the thing that you got to look at, first off, this is a terrible anti-take by you, Adam. Like this is exactly how you should be playing fantasy.
No, I mean, look, obviously I draft rookie wide receivers. I don't want to make it out like I don't, but I think you run the risk of overdrafting them if but
that's not what Dan's saying though.
I think that is kind of what Dan's saying.
No, he's not saying overdraft them. I think
Yeah,
so.
like
You gotta
not
kind
what
of.
I'm saying.
he said you can't be too aggressive drafting rookie wide
Yes,
receivers.
but that doesn't mean you're taking them in the first 3-4 rounds.
Correct.
It means that you're trying to take shots on guys that have the opportunity to be successful.
I would
And
never
so-
I would never dispute that. I would never
Well,
dispute
that's
that.
what it sounds like. You just
No, I'm not. I'm just saying rookie wide receivers are not the only players that have a chance of giving you late round value or
Correct.
mid-round value.
But the idea would be is like, okay, so just to throw out some examples from last year. Dan gave the positive ones, the neighbors, Thomas, McConkey. Keon Coleman, for example, was drafted or late round range, for mid to late round range. Did not pan out. I know for me last year, one of my last picks in a lot of my early drafts, so early August, was Jalen McMillan, and carried him for a few weeks. Had the touchdown. I think he scored in week 1, if I'm not mistaken, a 29-yard touchdown catch. That was only catch. Did nothing the rest of the way. Then Godwin, Evans get hurt. We all buy back in. He does nothing again for 3-4 weeks. Then has this monster finish. So you have to obviously sort of catch it a little bit with when do you have these guys on your roster and when do you part ways.
Okay, there's no way that Jalen McMillan is an example of drafting successfully at wide receiver. Nobody.
Correct. No, you're right.
Hold on to him.
That's what I'm saying. It's like it's
nobody did.
You have one of the more horrific examples of this. You drafted Justin Jefferson and dropped him because he wasn't doing much early in the season, and then he goes on for this monster finish. That's the risk you run, is you take some shots on these guys. So I'll give you another horrible example. Jalen Polk goes to New England, and a lot of hype because drafted, I think, ahead of McConkey, right? Or right around McConkey in round 2. Has this great opportunity and does nothing. So how long do you carry these guys? Xavier Legette, for example, great opportunity, right? Goes to Carolina. They don't have a standout receiving core. Does nothing. So you have to sort of understand what you're doing here when you're taking these shots. No one was cutting Marvin Harrison or Malik Neighbors.
What about Rome Odunze? He was a bust.
What about Xavier Worthy, who was a big help for you down the
Yeah,
stretch?
but he was a bust before that. Nobody was.
No, but if
the thing,
a lot of people held on to him because he had scores early in the season. I had him on a two rosters all year.
The thing again,
he was my flag.
It's what's your investment? How deep are your rosters? How long can you carry these guys? And you may end up making a bad decision because you may have to drop one of these players, and then they become what they could become. Odell Beckham did not get off to a great start. He was hurt in his rookie season.
First 4 games.
He was like week 4.
Yep.
He became a monster. So
but
it's just taking shots on opportunities and seeing if it pans out. And that's what it is. I think, once you get past, let's say, like round 8, so you're past all the obvious rookies. You're past the neighbors. You're past the I'm trying to think the way it was.
But that was it. That's kind of my point that I'm making, Jamey. Like, even this year,
no, I agree.
Everyone knew this was a historic class, Adam. Everyone knew it. It was talked about. Everyone who followed the draft.
I drafted a lot of rookies. I don't.
No. This is the perfect example. Even in this year, where everyone knew it was an historic class, the ADP was still so depressed. We were talking about with Heath, like, oh wow, would you even take Heath wouldn't take Neighbors in the first 6 rounds, right? Like, and Brian Thomas Jr. not drafted. Ladd McConkey, Xavier Worthy. These are all last round picks, despite being first round picks or borderline first round picks in the NFL draft in a historic class. Where can you get that kind of opportunity elsewhere in fantasy? Where a team is using a first-round pick on Xavier Worthy or Brian Thomas Jr., and you can get him in basically the last round of your fantasy drafts, despite it being ballyhooed as a historic class. That's
okay. You're making that point
every year.
You're making that point for me because it was a historic class.
No, my point is, even in a historic class, the ADPs are depressed, and it's an easy value gamble. Brian Thomas costs nothing. Xavier Worthy costs nothing. Ladd McConkey costs nothing for fantasy drafters.
We're not going to have a historic class again. That's what I'm saying. Like you're basing your rookie wide receiver strategy based on this class.
I'm not asking for them all to be Brian Thomas
historic
Jr.
class. So I'm saying don't overreach for rookie wide receiver.
He's not overreaching.
Right.
Yeah, of course, I'm not going to disagree with taking a shot on a guy in the last round.
That's what it always is. Even when you said Zay Flowers, he was basically a last round pick.
It's insincere to call Xavier Worthy and Rome Odunze last round picks.
Those were 10th to 12th round picks, not last round. But
it was not a 10th to 12th round pick.
Maybe he moved up to the 8th by the end of it, but Ladd McConkey was injured throughout camping. He was like a 12th to 13th round pick.
Yes, I know he was. He was a
Xavier
great.
Worthy wasn't being drafted high either. He didn't have a big camp, and there was Hollywood Brown at the time and tons of competition.
He was the top 100 pick. I'm looking at our ADP right now. He was 97th overall. Roma Dunze was.
When is this from? This ADP?
I don't know. I'm looking at CBS ADP.
It would be our last run
Our
ADP.
last
So
ADP.
figure
Yeah, I'm not
something
talking
around.
about last run because by then they get hyped. But the last day of the season.
Very
No,
specific.
but this is
Even
this
that's
is fair.
fine
So-
though. I'll
so-
let you use that.
Hold on, stop.
Brian Thomas Jr. was 117th. He wasn't your last pick.
Who
was
was
your
it?
10th
Who did you
round
just
pick.
say? Who was
Brian
117?
Thomas Jr. was 117th overall.
Okay, give me some guys around him. So we're just talking about taking shots.
Yeah.
So actually, this is perfect. Roma Dunze, Lad McConkey, Brian Thomas Jr. were all within 6 picks of each other.
Okay, but give me some of the veterans that were in that same range.
Jackson Smith and Jigba, Cortland Sutton, Marquise Brown, Jamison Williams,
Yeah,
Khalil
Dan, your argument
Shazier.
sucks. These guys are all better.
He cherry picked some good guys there.
I'm not cherry picking anything. I read every single wide receiver. So this was a great, first of all, what a great bunch of wide receivers.
Yeah, it's a great late round wide receiver year.
I'm saying, like, look, obviously, I don't disagree with the thought of like you love a rookie wide receiver, take a shot on them. I'm just saying that this was a great year.
I agree.
These 3 rookie wide receivers. There were some busts there as well. The journey of Xavier Worthy was pretty bad. I mean, he was useless until week 11, and he probably would have continued to be useless if Rashee Rice hadn't gotten hurt, or at least it's possible.
But that's the point. There's
Let's
always
be-
opportunity that opens up that we don't expect. And
Right.
the 2 points I'm making here: 1, there's opportunity every year that we don't expect. 2, people will always be more hesitant to take a player if they haven't seen him play. And 3, most importantly, 3, the investment is not high. No, even in a year that was ballyhooed as a historic year, these guys weren't drafted high. 117 for a first-round pick, Brian Thomas Jr., who could emerge as the number 1 player and did emerge as the number 1 player in that offense. That's what I'm talking about there.
All right.
What other position could you do that at?
Dan wins, Adam loses.
Oh, give me a you.
It's like tennis.
We'll let the
like
listeners
tennis.
decide. I'm pretty confident I won
I
this
think
one.
there's a lot of overlap in what we're saying and what we believe in. But
Yeah.
I just think you went too far with it, calling Brian Thomas
I
your
think
last
you went too far.
your last pick. That's obviously not what happened.
Basically, in a lot of drafts, he was. I know in that it says 117th overall, but
Yeah, I mean, what? It's just our ADP. That's just like thousands.
the end of the season ADP when he finally got some hype. Most people are not drafting.
Oh, I don't agree with
number
that.
10.
Okay. You know what? I'm just going to go to my lessons really quick here and get them out of the way before we run out of time. Lesson number 1, we may not know how to evaluate how good a player actually is. This is a really frustrating and really tough one. But you think about Baker Mayfield, Sam Darnold, Geno Smith. I would even throw Russell Wilson in there. Not that he was so great or anything like that, but quarterbacks that have been left for dead that nobody thought could ever be good. And, you know, we just have to maybe open our minds a little bit and look at new situations. And I'll just give another player that I think could be the next in that. And I think it could be Aaron Rodgers. And I don't think he could necessarily be fantasy relevant or all that. I think he could be like, you know, a streamer or something. But I think he could be good for a wide receiver. I still think that Rodgers, if he continues to play, could have a good season left in him. He's not going to run at all. But he was hurt like for pretty much all of last year. And I think Nathaniel Hackett has basically no credentials. So, you know, good situation, good offensive coordinator. Rodgers could still be a good quarterback that can help a fantasy wide receiver. I felt like Saquon Barkley wasn't really so great anymore. I didn't know. In his rookie season, Saquon Barkley had 7 carries of 40 or more yards. The next 5 years combined, he had 6. And then this year, he had the most big runs in NFL history, if you include the playoffs. I didn't know that Derrick Henry could be this good. He had averaged 4.3, 4.4, 4.2 yards per carry in his last 3 seasons. He averaged 5.9 this past year. I thought Joe Mixon, even though his metrics weren't that much better, thought he looked a lot better this year. So we got to open our minds and maybe not act so certain about who's good and who's bad. And maybe Najee Harris, maybe if he ends up in a good situation. I don't think so. He has like no big playability, but maybe he could be better than what we've seen. So that's lesson number 1. It's really, I don't know what to make of it other than need to be more open-minded, but it is hard to know. I mean, situation matters as much.
I was going to say that's the key lesson to take away from that. Like Mixon's the best example. I was much higher than him in the consensus because I looked at it like he's playing in a Bengals run scheme that does not fit his skill set at all, and he gets to go to outside zone where he can do the plant. And you watch Mixon play. He's at his best when he plants that foot and just drives vertically, and he's made some of his biggest runs this year with the Texans doing so. And so it was a great fit. So just look for maybe those blocking scheme fits, or in your sense with the quarterback, just better fits for the quarterback from a system standpoint.
And another lesson is that this one is tough, but preseason injuries create miserable draft day dilemmas. I think more often than not, we should take them seriously. I think about Travis Kelce 2 years ago hurting his foot. I think about Tyreek Hill. Tyreek Hill tore a ligament in his wrist in the preseason, and we just made nothing of it. But on the other hand, Jahmyr Gibbs had 2 soft tissue injuries, and he hurt his hamstring a couple weeks before the season started, I think. And we downgraded him a little bit. And he had finished as RB1, of course. And Puka Nacua hurt his knee in the preseason, and that ended up being a big deal because he re-injured it in week 1 and he missed some time.
Gibbs finished as RB1?
Yeah, because Barkley didn't play in week 18 and Gibbs
had
40 points or 38 points or something crazy in week 18.
Okay.
Not RB1 per game. I think preseason injuries are pretty important, and we need not to devalue them. But they do create these horrible draft day dilemmas because you don't want to pass up on a guy like Jahmyr Gibbs because he's got this hamstring injury. So when it starts to fall to a point where it's like, okay, I can't let him fall anymore. That's
McCaffrey.
Jump. McCaffrey's a great example.
Good example, yeah.
Absolutely.
The opposite.
Absolutely, yeah.
I still think from my experience playing fantasy, I'm curious where you guys stand on this. This is definitely just like anecdotal eye test, I guess. I would still tend to stay away from the preseason injury guys. I don't really like investing in them. I think it's too much risk.
It's just, I think what it comes down to is where do they fall? Like Gibbs fell to round 2, if I'm not mistaken, based on his ADP. Like, it was hard to pass up on that if he was still sitting there. McCaffrey fell to the middle of the first round. It was like, okay, hopefully he's back. You take a shot on that.
There was some bad reporting on McCaffrey too, to be fair.
It wasn't bad reporting. It was a bad quote from his coach. He said if there's a playoff game, he's playing tomorrow.
Right.
When Kyle Shanahan says that, like,
you shouldn't miss 8 weeks.
Somewhat believe that it's not going to be 8 weeks. It's going to be maybe 3 or 4.
Yeah. All right. We can take a break here and save time for Jamey's lessons.
So far, your lessons learned are so much better than that.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I put a lot more time into it, and Adam, Adam needs a break. He needs a break. It's the off season.
News and notes. We do have some news to get to, including I skipped over the Bobby Slowick news, but that was pretty interesting. And I wanted to have time for some fantasy cops, so we'll see if we can make that happen. We'll be right back on Fantasy Football Today.
The clock never stops. Relive the greatest moments with uninterrupted highlights and more.
It's Gareth Bale. Ronaldo. Wonderful goal.
On the UEFA Champions League channel. Streaming free.
All right, welcome back, everybody. Jamey, 2 lessons learned. Go for it.
Well, I kind of alluded to this with, when you brought up some of the running back conversation. I shouldn't be as rigid on older running backs based on what happened this past season. And I think I kind of touched on this a little bit. And I hate using this phrase again, but I'll use it again. Moving the goalposts a little bit on maybe when the age should be considered for when these guys are going to break down. I mean, think about what just happened. Derrick Henry at 30 had one of his best seasons ever. Again, situation changed, but he was great. Alvin Kamara, 29 years old, 19 PPR points per game. Joe Mixon, 28 years old, had a fantastic season, as you guys just talked about. Was changing teams. James Conner did not get injured until the end of the season, had another fantastic season. Aaron Jones, wasn't a superstar, but was still very serviceable, despite the fact that it looked like he might be falling off a cliff. I'm trying to think of anybody else in
Barkley. People considered old for running backs. That was a big part of it. Barkley. I know he's only
Barkley 27. I don't know if that really was
considered that the age cliff for
he wasn't really in that range for me. Like I don't view 27 as like the Grim Reaper time. Usually it's 28, 29 is when they start to, at least for me, I start to get a little bit worried. But these guys were great. They were absolutely great. Now they're all going to be older. We'll see how it how they're viewed, and it'll come down to where I want to value these guys, where ADP tells us these guys are going, if they're worth it or not. But in the case of these older running backs, they were still amazing, and I have to sort of change my approach a little bit, not just to write them off completely.
All right, how about number 2?
Not all running quarterbacks are great.
It's true.
But this one is where, like, more so to me than rookie wide receivers, you need to take shots on mobile quarterbacks because they have just so much upside.
Correct. But that's the point, is like not all of them are going to be great, and so it's like we look at it and say, we had this conversation, Adam, I think it was on Fantasy Football to Express. Heath and I discussed it a little bit yesterday on the Dynasty show. So he actually asked me, it's funny, the same question you asked me. Is there any concern about Jaden Daniels going into year 2 based on the rookie season that CJ Stroud just had? And, we had all these high expectations for him year over year. And so the answer I gave you, same thing I told Heath, is like, the running is going to save him, from a fantasy perspective. If the passing struggles, at least, Jaden Daniels can rely on his legs and sort of still give you somewhat of a higher floor than what we saw with Stroud, who was just completely miserable when everything sort of fell apart for him. In the case, let's say, of Anthony Richardson. So, you have a guy that had, the reason I came up with this one was, I went back, looked at bold predictions. And one of my bold predictions was we're going to have 3 quarterbacks run for 800 yards or more, which would have been a record. We had 2, so the 2 of the 3 that I thought would do it, Lamar Jackson and Jaden Daniels, they did. The third one, Anthony Richardson, did not. And so we saw how this unfolded for him. He was good when he ran the ball. He was terrible when he threw the ball, and so you have to have somewhat of a passing presence, and so I don't think you should expect these guys to be 3,800, like what Jaden Daniels did, 4,900, like Lamar Jackson did. That's not sustainable. If you can get a 3,700 season out of your quarterback, kind of what Daniel Jones did his best year in his career, you're going to have a pretty good fantasy season, so touchdowns will matter clearly. But, I think about Kyler Murray too, where the running wasn't necessarily the best for him in terms of where he was at for the season. And he had an up and down, a choppy year, wasn't great, where for me going into the year was, okay, now he's got these weapons plus what he'll do with his legs, 2 years removed from his ACL. He should get back to being a standout fantasy quarterback. And again, had good moments, but just not consistent. So we'll see how this quarterback class, Sanders is obviously somebody who can move. Cam Ward can run a little bit, not to maybe the level of a Jaden Daniels, but, these guys are going to have mobility. And as we're seeing, being a mobile quarterback is huge, for what NFL teams are looking for. Just being a pure pocket passer, unless you're Joe Burrow, I don't think is going to, carry these guys anymore. They got to have the ability to make some plays with their legs to some extent, like a Drake May, like a Bo Nix. We'll see if Penix can be one of those guys too. But in any event, don't, for me, it's just don't fall for the shiny rushing, quarterback toy that I always get too excited about. And sometimes it burns us.
Kyler's pretty interesting because 575 rushing yards, I think, from Kyler Murray. That's pretty good. 572. He's only had 1 year with more than that. And that was a year where he ran 133 times. By comparison, he ran 78 times this year. But this I think was a fairly normal, if not, well, let me just see yards per game. It's pretty normal year for Kyler Murray. Richardson, it's easy to see what went wrong for Richardson. He's just not a good quarterback yet. And couldn't really make up for it with his rushing on a week-to-week basis. I don't know what happened with Kyler. He didn't throw that much. His touchdown rate was down. He feels like we're going to do bounce back candidates tomorrow. He feels like a pretty obvious bounce back candidate to me.
Should be.
And he wasn't that bad. He was a little under 20 points per game. But yeah, I mean, I wasn't.
The expectations were much. I mean, at least for me, I was expecting a breakout season for Kyler.
It's funny how things work. He was one guy. I don't think I drafted a single share of Kyler Murray, and I really regretted it because we kept talking about him. He's like one of our favorite kind of sleeper.
Someone who drafted way too many shares of Kyler Murray, you did not regret it. He was
no, I know it worked out. It worked out, but not on purpose. That was luck for me. But I think Kyler just look. If Harrison has a better year, then he'll have a better. They'll lift each other up. I hope. And then like McBride scoring hardly any touchdowns. That was weird.
I think from watching that system now 2 years in a row there, I'm downgrading my thoughts and expectations of the ceiling of Kyler Murray. First of all, I think he's genuinely trying to become a better quarterback, which means going through more of your progressions and getting the ball out as a quarterback on time. He's not the greatest at that. In my opinion, he doesn't use the middle of the field that well. He doesn't really time up and sync up with Harrison. But he had
hard for those guys to see the middle of the field.
What'd you say?
It's hard for the smaller quarterback to see the middle of the field. I mean, you think about Russell Wilson. You think about really the one guy that was successful at it by far the best was Drew Brees.
Yeah, he's just an unbelievable. Nobody anticipated like Drew Brees. Like that's a Hall of Fame level anticipation. But Kyler doesn't have that in my mind. And I think just looking at that system, he's not really, like you mentioned, Adam, it was an okay Kyler year running. I don't think it was at like 130 versus 78 attempts to me is a massive difference.
Yeah, but that 130 year was an outlier.
Sure, but that's what people kind of were in some way hoping for when you
should not
draft.
have been hoping for that because
Maybe
that's
not
just
hoping for it, but
you're
I would have split the difference.
yeah, right,
Around 100.
exactly. Like if you're buying him for his ceiling, you're not expecting 78 attempts. I think you were expecting a little bit more.
I definitely agree with that because he had 93 attempts in 16 games as a rookie, then 133 attempts in 16 games, then 88 attempts in 14 games, and then 78 attempts in 17 games. You're probably right.
Difference, and I think that's going to stay the same. I don't think that's changing.
All right. All right. Those are our lessons learned. Let's go to our news and notes. The Steelers will likely sign either Russell Wilson or Justin Fields. And then they, their owner, Art Rooney, said some interesting stuff about George Pickens. Basically said he's a very talented player. He said exactly this. Very talented player who has room to grow. So,
it wasn't really very interesting, but he did say it.
What's that?
I mean, you framed that as he said some very interesting things about George Pickens. Just like he's a talented player with room to grow.
He basically, he didn't mean.
Doesn't everyone know that?
He didn't mean grow as a player necessarily.
Yeah, as a person. Yeah, we all know that.
Pretty interesting to have a press conference and just completely, I think he said something like every team has one or two players or you have to coach differently.
Right. Yeah.
To just say that out loud about George Pickens is, I think it's quite a call out.
Well, I mean, look, he's coming up on a contract situation, so entering year 4, it's time for him to, play to the level of what he's capable of, which could be one of the best receivers.
Yes.
In that second tier. I don't think he's ever going to be one of the elite guys, but he could certainly be in that next tier of guys. He's got that upside and that potential. He's got to, clearly get a little bit more mature and then establish his route tree and prove that he can do that. I'm sure he can, but he just hasn't shown it yet. They have so many questions offensively. Their backfield, both guys are free agents.
Yep.
Their quarterback situation is non-existent right now. Their second receiver is non-existent right now. Maybe Roman Wilson can become that guy, but so many question marks that, could be a lot of fun if they, end up finding the right answers to this team. But clearly the quarterback situation is a big one. And now you have the other story at play with Russell Wilson is that he may go to the Raiders.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And by the way, for Najee Harris, Jaylen Warren, I think, is a restricted free agent.
I'm pretty sure they're both unrestricted, but check that.
Okay. But for those guys, the difference between being in this running back class free agency and last year's running back class, this free agency class stinks.
It's really bad, specifically at running back. Can I make one quick take? If Russell Wilson goes to the Raiders, Freddie changed out their coaching staff, I think I'm going to have to not buy Brock Bowers in any league next year. I think I'm not going to be able to. I don't think he's going to be able to pay off his ADP at all. I don't think Russell Wilson's a good fit at all for Brock Bowers. At all.
He's restricted. You're
right. Warren's restricted. I don't think there's ever. Jimmy Graham had a good touchdown year, maybe a couple with Russell Wilson.
But that's just touchdown year.
Never been a good tight end.
Using the middle of the field.
I never had a Brock Bowers.
I don't like the idea of changing that system out either for Bowers. That hurts me. Bowers was in a lot of ways a volume play. They designed the whole offense around him. I guess the hope is they'll just do that again. But
did they sign Darrell Bevell or that's just a rumor?
Not yet.
No.
Dallas hired Matt Eberflus as their defensive coordinator, the former Bears coach. The Texans did fire Bobby Slowick. Do we like this? Slowick was last year.
Yeah, I mean, I think we like this just based on the fact that they've regressed so much. But really, I mean, the fact of the matter is Bobby Slowick doesn't play offensive line for the Texans, and he didn't, he had no control over the injuries on the O-line. It just goes to show, though, quick take outside of fantasy, anyone who says Liam Cohen did the wrong thing, I'm against you. And I think he did the right thing. Because if you get a chance at a head coach job, you take it. Because Bobby Slowick was the hottest candidate on the market, and now he's looking for a job.
But also, I'm glad you brought Liam Cohen up because he only has 1 year as a coordinator. Well, I guess he was the Rams coordinator, but only 1 year as a play caller, I think, in the NFL. So I hope he's not the next Bobby Slowick.
I don't think he will, because just looking at what he did at Kentucky with Will Levis was phenomenal stuff. He was the only one to ever generate any kind of production out of Levis.
I don't know for a fact. I mean, I think I'm right about that only 1 year as a play caller in the NFL.
In the NFL, you are right about that. He came from Kentucky. He was with the Rams, but he was like an assistant.
No, he was an offensive coordinator for the Rams in 2022.
But he didn't call plays.
He didn't call the plays. He was an assistant with the Rams before that in 2018 through 2020. And then he had 2 stints in Kentucky, 21 and 23. All right. Dalton Kincaid. He's been dealing with 2 knee injuries this year, a torn PCL in one knee and fluid in the other knee. So these are things that there are probably so many players. We don't know the injuries that they've been dealing with, but keep it in mind. Dalton Kincaid dealing with 2 injured knees. I also saw a really interesting quote from Bills guard Osiris Torrance. He's talking about the 4th down play. And I saw someone on Twitter break down the 4th down play, not the 4th and 1, the 4th and 5. There was pressure immediately on the cornerback blitz. Was it Jeff Schwartz? I think he was breaking it down.
Probably he does those.
Yeah. And he was saying, like, look at this formation look at this line, the way that the Chiefs are aligned and how many guys they have guarding on the left side of the field and how many they have guarding on the right side of the field. It should be obvious that the pressure's coming from your right, their left, right? There was their left cornerback coming off the right side of the Bills offensive line on the blitz. And the Chiefs were sliding their protection to the left. They got it wrong. Well, here's what the Bills got it wrong. Here's what Osiris Torrance, their offensive lineman, said. We called the protection to slide left. I guess from film, they will blitz from where they're not showing it from. So they showed it from the right. So we were thinking they were doing it from the left, but they actually brought it from the right this time. It's just, you can say it's an error. I think they just called a better play than we had in offense, just how the game goes.
Yeah. That's Steve.
I also think he didn't block him. That's their right guard, right?
I don't know if he's their left guard. Oh, yeah, he's their right guard. Right guard.
Yeah, I don't think he blocked anybody on that play too.
Well, that's the thing, Jamie. No one talks about that, like the free blitzer. What if you didn't rush? If they didn't rush that free corner, like they already had pressure regardless, just with the interior guy. I know what you're talking about. I forgot who it was for the Chiefs. I don't think it was Chris Jones, but whoever that was.
Zach Ertz is not retiring, and he wants to return to the Commanders. He's a free agent. Matt LaFleur says
end up drafting him as a fantasy starter. Yeah, next year. I can already see it.
Matt LaFleur said he wants to feature the tight end more. A few weeks, not too long ago,
last week
we talked about Tucker Kraft. Good sleep.
Our top 12 tight ends.
Yeah, there you go. And the Ravens signed offensive coordinator Todd Monken to a contract extension.
That's good news. Very good news.
That's all the news and notes I got. Okay, so that gives us a little bit of time. Get your sirens ready.
You apparently need to get your siren ready.
Get your handcuffs out, folks.
By the way, great joke by Thomas in the chat.
What was the joke? All right, hold on. What was the joke?
You mentioned Kincaid's knees were hurt, but he said his hands were healthy.
Well, that's not nice. You know what? I don't stand for that on this show. That's not what we're about, Thomas. It's unbelievable. I'm really surprised. I'm surprised. It's just we're above that. All right, fantasy.
We are not above that.
We're not above that. This is from Dave Ricard. We have a listener named Dave Ricard.
That's awesome.
Let's say there are a couple of us in a league who hate kickers and DSTs, but most of the league wants them to stay in. Then say I play the guy who's with me on this in the playoffs. We agree that neither of us will play kickers or DSTs for our game against each other, just to show the rest of the league how much better it is. Is that collusion?
I mean, by definition, this might be collusion, and this might be the first case of collusion that I support. I fully support this. To show them, teach them a lesson about how stupid. Sorry, I shouldn't be saying this. A lot of people that listen to us like to play defense and kickers. Enjoy. If you want to add some variance and randomness to fantasy, although there already is so much randomness and variance, if you some reason want to add more, enjoy it. I get it. You have one more player to root for, but I am so in favor of this, making a point, showing how random it is. And look, you don't play your defense, they don't play their defense. You don't play their kicker, they don't play their kicker. I don't see anything wrong with it.
Yeah, why is this considered collusion?
It's not like
teams are agreeing together. They're talking and they're agreeing to do something.
But they're each giving themselves the potential of a negative,
right? Or no negative. No, they're
collusion. I guess I'd be
not impacting the league unless you're going to say their point totals may sway playoff standings.
Yeah, in which case they're hurting themselves. I don't know. I mean,
I don't see how it's collusion.
I don't think it's collusion. I think it would bother me a little bit if I were the commissioner and two teams skirted the rules, but if it's not written in the rules, I guess it's okay.
Yeah.
So right, the rule would have to say you have to play complete lineup.
Yeah, exactly.
But where's that ever written in any rules? I've never seen that.
Well, like in our leagues on CBS, you have to say minimal lineup starters.
Yes.
So
do.
you can't not have if this setting is designated, you can't not pull defense or kicker out of your lineup.
I also
So it's
I
hard.
really
It's hard to
don't-
do a DSTL. You could obviously take a kicker that's not an active kicker and put him in
Right.
your lineup and just take zeros, but you can't do it with DSTs.
Oh, you could start the Colts DST in week 17.
That's true.
I think
Those bleepers.
one of the things that Dan said, of course, I think was a really ridiculous thing to say, but he said that I miss Dan. You just want to insert.
Adam's taking advantage of the fact that I'm on mute because there's work being done in the back and I can't defend myself.
You
Go.
have to insert some randomness in your with kickers and DSTs. Like, let's not act like the other positions are so predictable. We get everything.
Oh,
right.
come on, Adam. Look at it. You don't even. Are you really trying to argue that kicker is not more random than the other positions? Please.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't done the research.
Such a bad take. This
No,
might be your
no,
worst fantasy take ever. You're saying kicker doesn't have more variance than other positions.
I have no idea. I have no
You
idea.
have no idea? Well, then just go look it up after the show, and then you're going to be surprised to see how wrong you are.
How am I supposed to look that up?
By looking at each year where we project the ADP for kickers and who actually finishes at the top.
Oh my God, the ADP for kickers. We don't project the ADP for kickers.
Whatever, not ADP, whatever, whoever you're ranking kickers, they don't finish according to rank.
Yeah, neither do the running backs.
Oh, yeah, a lot of the guys at the top do. Jamar Chase, you know what I mean? This
sure,
is not,
a lot of
let's stop
kickers-
acting. Oh my God.
Oh, okay. First of all,
You know what? Someone smarter than me can use
wasn't-
data and data points to prove that I'm right on this, and I will find that person.
I wasn't thinking of it from a draft perspective. I was thinking of it
That's
from
the whole point. The
I
whole
was
point
thinking
of
of
why
it from a-
kickers are dumb is because you draft them
Go
in a
on
certain
mute.
way.
Go on mute.
You know what I've never noticed before? Dan's got kind of like dinosaur arms.
Does he? No,
They are a little short. Are they short? Are
no, they're
short
not.
arms?
Don't let them get in your head. Listen, I wasn't thinking of it
I
from a
got some
draft perspective. I was thinking of picking up a streamer, and like with stream tight ends. Oh my gosh, streaming tight ends is no different than streaming kickers.
I know, but it's not about streaming, Adam. First of all, I'd probably argue back on that and push back a little, but it's not about, but you might be right on that. It's not about streaming. It's about the point where, like, if you rank the kickers 1 through 12 preseason, it never finishes anywhere close to that.
All right. I don't think we don't put 1/50th of the amount of time researching how to rank kickers as we do the other positions.
Hey, whoa.
Rank them because it's random, Adam. That's why, because you don't do it because it's random.
That might
I'm
be true.
insulted by that.
That's why we
Insulted
draft
by
them.
that.
Yeah, and
Draft
Jamey is
them
insulted
late.
by that.
But I'm saying just picking
My
them-
awards say differently.
All right, I'm moving on here. From Scuba Steve, I am the champ. Why is it that Dan just brings out all of these takes in me? He just brings something out in me.
Dinosaur Dan.
Scuba Steve needs our help. I feel like I know this was in my notes. He says I never read it, but I never read it with Dan at least. All right, so he needs a punishment for the loser. He needs an epic punishment. He wants to bring pain to the loser on draft day. And
I got the best one.
make him want draft day to be over more than anything in the world. So he's thinking about making the loser wear a wet itch sweater with giant Mickey cartoon hands sewn to it so he can't take them off when he's eating, when he's trying to make his draft picks, anything like that. What, you say you have something better?
No, never mind. I misheard this. I was thinking of draft punishment. I didn't know draft day.
Draft day. How do we make draft day horrible for and they have to draft in a public place, by the way.
So like you want this person to be in physical pain.
Any kind of pain, I think, is
humiliation.
Well, like humiliation is different, but like this is like actual pain.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah.
I think at some point you just walk up behind him and you just slime him like old Nickelodeon. Just slime, and he has to sit in like the wet slime for the whole draft. That's a start.
25th anniversary of Slime Time Live, by the way. This
wow,
last week.
I saw your brother posted something on some social media about
25th anniversary of Slime Time Live. The most definitive proof we have that Adam is not his parents' favorite child.
Well, we'll be 20. What will be 2034 or something? Will be the 25th anniversary of me on fantasy football today.
Okay, that's. I don't think your parents are counting down that one like the Slime Time Live.
We're 33, I think. Yeah. I don't know. I mean, I don't do anything like this, but having him wear horrible clothes in public
Dump
is
some stuff on him.
kind of funny.
I mean, if it's like physical pain, like you can probably, if you're going somewhere, like make him eat things that are just completely disgusting.
True.
And would you
Make him eat
would you
some
laugh
nasty
at someone who wore rollerblades into a restaurant?
Would you laugh at them?
So
Yeah,
I
probably.
I
just
mean,
seen
that's
somebody
probably
wear
like, haha, look at that guy.
Yeah, I haven't seen that. Knee pads, like make it
Oh
wear
yes, with the knee pads.
knee pads, elbow pads, a helmet.
Yes.
I think that's
But
a
that's
good.
just like a
good.
momentary laughter thing. Like, I think if
Right.
you're like in a public place, like you should, if you're at a restaurant or something, like make him stand on the table and like do like a monologue every round.
Make him just like randomly blurt out Hushmanzada. What was that Hushmanzada commercial?
Hashmazili.
Hushmanzada. Just start.
But like come up with like some random monologues from like TV shows or movies that people know, or maybe just
Yeah, I agree.
off the cuff, and like they got to stand on the table and just like recite it. It's like he's got it like.
Everyone pick one monologue for. And I have to go, but pick one monologue for this person. How about like
Coffees for Losers from Glengarry Glen Ross.
Oh, okay, that's pretty old school. It's a horrible movie, by the way.
That final monologue.
That's one of the best speeches.
Don't you forget about me. What's that movie that everybody likes that I think was terrible? Yeah, whatever the final monologue is there.
I think Dorothy Boyd, thank you. I think that the Jerry Maguire monologue.
It's not like you got to stand on a table every round and do a monologue.
Yeah. All right. Thank you. I'm sorry I have to run. FFT Express with Dan and Jamey is coming up. They're going to talk about the top 12 tight ends. We will talk to you tomorrow with bounce back players for 2025. See you later.